If we knew you were a supporter of Hamas, we would not give you a visa. Because this is a test run. This is a trial run to see, can we go after a head of state from a nation that's not a member? If we can go after them and we can get it done with regards to Israel, they will apply that to the United States at some point. Hamas carried out an atrocious operation. They sent a bunch of savages into Israel with the express and explicit purpose of targeting civilians.
Since October 7th, there's been a disturbing rise in anti-Semitism, pro-terrorist violence in our cities, on college campuses. You and I had the opportunity to write an op-ed together. And in that op-ed, we called on foreign nationals who support Hamas or other terrorist organizations to lose their visas and to be sent back to their home countries. As Secretary of State, of course, you'll be responsible for overseeing the issuance of visas. How will you enforce our laws to ensure that we remove supporters of terrorist groups from our country?
Listen, my view on this is one of common sense. Okay? If you apply for a visa to come into the United States, and in the process of being looked at, it comes to light that you're a supporter of Hamas, we wouldn't let you in. If we knew you were a supporter of Hamas, we would not give you a visa. So now that you got the visa and you're inside the U.S., and now we realize you're a supporter of Hamas, we should remove your visa. If you could not come in because you're a supporter of Hamas, you should not be able to stay on a visa if you're a supporter of Hamas. That's how I view it. And I think that's just an issue of common sense. And we intend to be very forceful about that.
Let me talk for a minute about the International Criminal Court. Look, as you know, we've got real problems there. The court originally was intended, at least from our point of view, to be a court that focused on international crimes that were committed by people from countries who did not have a robust democracy nor a robust judicial system that held its own people accountable for crimes. The court's gone beyond that, obviously. They are not only focusing on people who aren't accountable elsewhere, but they're also focusing on people who come from countries that solve their own problems, like the United States of America and like Israel. The most recent obvious thing that flowed from that was the indictment on the same day of Netanyahu plus a Hamas character. Any court that is a court of law has to be able to recognize good from bad. And when you try to indict two people and show some type of moral equivalency in that regard, they're just barking up the wrong tree. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to rein them up. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the ICC has done tremendous damage to its global credibility. First of all, it is going after a non-member state on the claims that I believe, in fact, I think just in the last 24 hours, the Israeli High Court filed an appeal before the ICC, even though it's not a member state. And I saw some of the filings from the prosecutor, Mr. Khan, was involved in that process. And he argues that they have the right to go after non-members for their activities within the confines of member states in this case. And I think, first of all, the whole premise of his prosecution is flawed, beyond the process of it and the precedent that it sets, which is a very dangerous precedent for the United States of America, by the way, because this is a test run. This is a trial run to see, can we go after a head of state from a nation that's not a member? If we can go after them and we can get it done with regards to Israel, they will apply that to the United States at some point. And in fact, there have been threats to do so in the past. But the premise of the prosecution itself is completely and utterly flawed. As you said, they went ahead, I think they also went after Sinwar. Well, number one, Sinwar didn't travel around the world. He's not with us any longer. But he didn't travel around the world, was at no risk of being apprehended. Second of all, the moral equivalency piece of it was offensive. Let me explain, and I think I don't need to explain to this committee. Hamas carried out an atrocious operation. They sent a bunch of savages into Israel with the express and explicit purpose of targeting civilians. They went into concerts. They went into these music festivals. They knew that there were no soldiers at the music festival. They knew that these were teenagers and young families, that they went into different communities and the kibbutzes and the like, and they deliberately targeted civilians. Deliberately. It was in fact, they kidnapped the ones they didn't murder, the families who they didn't eviscerate, the people whose skulls they didn't crack open. They kidnapped and to this day continue to hold people, innocents that they took. A deliberate operation. In the case of Israel, responding to that attack has had to go after Hamas. How can you coexist? How can any nation state on the planet coexist side by side with a group of savages like Hamas? They have to defend their national security and their national interest, as I pointed out in my opening statement. And so there is no more, and they didn't target civilians. Now, sadly and unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll discuss it further, some of the other questions that will come up here today, one of the horrible things about war, it's a terrible thing about war, and it's why we should try to prevent it at almost any cost, is that innocent people are caught up in it. And that's true of every conflict on the planet. But there is a difference between those who, in the conduct of armed action, deliberately target civilians, and those who do as much as they can to avoid civilians being caught up against an enemy that doesn't wear a uniform, against an enemy that hides in tunnels, against an enemy that hides behind women and children and puts them at the forefront and uses them as human shields. That's who Hamas is. There is no moral equivalency, and I think the ICC, if they don't drop this, will find its credibility globally badly damaged, and I think the United States should be very concerned because I believe this is a test run for applying it to American service members and American leaders in the future.